This as the 14th round of Twitter files have been revealed, and revealed how top Democrats tried to discredit the Nunes memo, which blew wide open the fact that the collusion story was a lie. They had this hashtag, release the memo, and they said it gained traction because of Russian bots. It resulted in national media denouncing Nunes, calling him and his Nunes report a joke. The Nunes memo was called a joke on NBC, on MSNBC, The Washington Post, The New York Times.
So the Nunes memo is a dud, failing to prove that the Russia investigation was illegitimate or that it was based solely on the Steele dossier.
Well, there were certain fundamental claims that Nunes made in the now discredited memo, which we can see in the FISA application were simply not true.
What is your reaction to the release of this memo?
It's very disturbing that the Republicans in the House would be willing to risk our republic to protect the president. And that's what they're doing. They're releasing classified information, and they're asserting facts that are not supported by the evidence.
This memo came from 40-year-old virgin Devin Nunes, who is chairman of the House Intelligence Committee. I got to say, I don't really trust this guy to untangle a vast conspiracy. I wouldn't really trust him to untangle a pair of headphones. Now, I'm trying to put myself in his shoes, and it's pretty easy because his shoes are Velcro. But I don't really understand how any of this is important. So I'm just going to treat this memo like every other memo I've received at work and completely ignore it.
The Inspector General's report on FISA abuse against the Trump campaign is finally here, and it is a bombshell if I have ever seen one.
The GOP argument says that the FISA warrant, that thing you need to eavesdrop on Americans, was done in haste, partially based on the infamous Steele dossier. Based on everything we've seen, the FBI wouldn't have been able to get a FISA warrant without probable cause to believe that Page was acting as a foreign agent.
Well, look, at this point, after you had the Nunes memo essentially cherry pick information, mislead the public, and we had to issue our corrective memo.
We know that the Devin Nunes memo about FISA abuse was accurate, whereas the Schiff memo turned out to be totally debunked. And we learned that the Trump campaign was, in fact, spied on. It's
something Donald Trump said in a tweet, and that is, I was illegally surveilled by the Obama administration in Trump Tower. Now, that is nonsense, but nonetheless, this effort by Nunes and Gowdy and others has been an attempt to try to somehow justify that blatantly false statement by the president.
The Democratic minority is loudly calling bullshit on the memo and the rationale for releasing it. But in the House, they're being shut down by the Republicans, led by Devin Nunes, the chairman of the Intel Committee.
You remember the dueling memos. You and
Yes.
Devin Nunes had dueling memos about the FISA process. Yours read, FBI and DOJ officials did not abuse the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act process, omit material information, or subvert this vital tool to spy on the Trump campaign. In hindsight, do you regret writing that?
Well, I don't regret that because at the time, that's what we knew. Now, 2 years later, we learned there were serious problems. And the suggestion that the chairman makes there and others on the committee have made also that the entire dossier was included in this is just plain false.
Because the FISA applications relied entirely on information from the primary subsources reporting to support the allegation that Page was coordinating with the Russian government on 2016 U.S. presidential election activities.
Is it possible, in your view, for the DOJ or the FBI to have gone to the FISA court to get a warrant, to get a FISA warrant strictly based on one dossier written by one MI6 ex-official?
Yeah, I can't imagine a federal judge signing off on that. So,
because the FISA applications relied entirely on information from the primary subsources reporting.
If our memo were released, the public would see 10 pages of details that lay out the true timeline here. I think the American people will walk away seeing new, unseen evidence from our memo, but also the FBI's credibility will be bolstered.
Especially because you felt so strongly. I mean, your statement was a very strong statement, and yet it turns out that there were real problems, as you've admitted.
Well, look, it is certainly true that 2 years ago when we looked into this matter, we weren't aware that a low-level FBI lawyer had misstated information in the FISA application. There was no way for us to know that at the time.
John McCain issued a statement criticizing the Nunes memo today, saying the latest attacks on the FBI and the Department of Justice serve no American interest, no parties, no presidents, only Putin's. Our nation's elected officials, including the president, must stop looking at this investigation through the warped lens of politics and manufacturing partisan sideshows. If we continue to undermine our own rule of law, we're doing Putin's job for him. Strong words from the senator from Arizona.
If he were to use this, as you've said, debacle, as everyone has said, shoddy sham of a memo as a pretext for firing Rosenstein, it would be among the most brazen abuses of executive power, really, in the history of the Republic.
I think it's a really dishonest thing to do, and people in Congress that support this are going to be held to account.
So years of media claims, years of reporting have been pushed down the drain finally by the IG report. And this is a vindication of Trump if I have ever seen one.
There is no demonstration in this memo, in this misleading memo, of a systemic abuse at the FBI, as has been posited by the president and his allies.
Nevertheless, we found that investigators failed to meet their basic obligations of ensuring that the FISA applications were scrupulously accurate.
But the whole point here is not to be accurate. The point is to be misleading.
The allegation that's being made by the Republicans that someone within the FBI or Justice Department could essentially trick or fool a federal judge at FISA to issue a warrant for surveillance, is that a profound ignorance about how this whole process works? Aren't there more checks and balances in place?
We identified significant inaccuracies and omissions in each of the 4 applications, 7 in the first application and a total of 17 by the final renewal application.
That someone within the FBI or Justice Department could essentially trick or fool a federal judge at FISA to issue a warrant for surveillance.
Look at this. In a letter to the FISA court, the Department of Justice admitted that at least 2 of their applications against Trump campaign associate Carter Page lacked probable cause and that its surveillance of Page should not have continued.
Someone within the FBI or Justice Department could essentially trick or fool a federal judge at FISA to issue a warrant for surveillance. Is that a profound ignorance about how this whole process works?
A stunning admission of guilt that FISA abuse occurred.
If you read the application, you would know.
Illicit spying occurred, and the rights of not only an innocent American were trampled, but that means all the spying on a candidate, transition team, and president, yeah, that was happening too.
Are there more checks and balances in place?
There are a lot of checks and balances in place. And what's more, that's a gross mischaracterization of what has happened here.
And so now it's basically taken Elon Musk to take control of one of these companies to understand the truth that the Democrats have been working in conjunction with corporate America to suppress information, to put out misinformation, and to try to cast aspersions against Donald Trump and the Republican Party. There's going to be more investigations about this because this is a type of thing you cannot have in the United States of America.
Do you think it's a problem that they were sent evidence in the Russia investigation when they are subjects of the investigation? You don't see a conflict there?
What in the no?
Donald Trump and
maybe
Don,
I would.
Don
but
McGahn.
in the case of today's memo, what specifically have I espoused that empowers threats to our country?
You're peddling the narrative that the Trump administration is putting out, which also is the Putin narrative because they're retweeting this with their Russian bots. If you're on the same side as WikiLeaks and Putin,
I wonder, do you perceive
if you're on the same side as WikiLeaks and Putin, you should take a step back and wonder, whose bidding are you really doing?
I don't even know what to say. I don't want to explode on TV, so I'm just going to end the segment now.
Just extraordinary that you have a sitting congressman, an elected official, at the time the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, I'm talking about Adam Schiff, going on TV shows like Chuck Todd on NBC and telling the American people that there was collusion between Trump and Russia, quote unquote, in plain sight. Why does he get a pass to lie? He was the chairman of the Intel Committee. We know he knew otherwise, okay? We know that he had the evidence. He was in the Schiff. He was looking at the documents. He was conducting open testimony. We know he knew otherwise. How does he get away with going on TV and lying to the American people that there's collusion in plain sight? Where's the accountability?
Well, actually, he's not going to get away with this one. There's a reason why Speaker McCarthy is going to remove him from the Intel Committee. This is the reason why. Because he blatantly was lying. There are many members who believe he was leaking to the press, leaking key information to the press. And so that's one of those things we're not going to allow him to stay on the Intel Committee, because now the proof is clear to the American people that Adam Schiff just simply can't be trusted with one of the most sensitive committees in all of Congress, the Intelligence Committee.
And thank you for exposing the truth with me all those years back in 2017 and 2018. Are you feeling vindicated?
This latest round is what we already knew, but it actually shows what Twitter knew, when they knew it, what they were talking about. And clearly Adam Schiff, who we knew at the time, always lied. But this is proof of that he knew there was nothing there. They knew it wasn't Russian bots. And then, my Senator Feinstein, of all people, who was also doing the same thing. And when Twitter came back and said, hey, there's nothing there, they doubled down and tried to get, basically they tried to get Twitter to lie and make something up. Now, look, back in 17 and 18, I think that Twitter was probably reluctant to do that. But clearly by 19 and 20 and 21, they got the memo until Elon Musk bought them. And thankfully, they put this information out. So it gives a little bit of clarity and closure to a dark chapter in American history.
Those Democrats who were involved was Adam Schiff, Senator Dianne Feinstein. But at the time, Adam Schiff became the chairman of the Intel Committee. So they knew they had, classified documents. They had the Schiff documents that they would look at. They had testimony. I mean, he had access to all of the information. So he had to know that what he was saying was not true, right? They said you distorted the classified information, that what you said was incorrect.
Twitter would come in and tell us point blank, we don't have any evidence of the Russians doing anything. Now, when we progressed to actually show the corruption between the DOJ, the FBI, the Democratic Party, the fake news media, when we went out to do that with the memo back in early 2018, that's when they conjured up this, release the memo. Nobody in America possibly wants to see this memo released. We had all the crooks at the FBI, all the dirty cops that were also clearly trying to stop that memo from coming out. In spite of all of that, Twitter still came in at the time and said, look, we don't have any information here, any evidence that the Russians are behind the release the memo hashtag that was trending on social media at the time. So instead, what would happen is Schiff would get the same briefings, Feinstein would get the same briefings. We now have evidence that they were getting the same briefings and the same information. And he would walk out of the Schiff along with all the other Democrats. They'd hold press conference and they say, this is a Russian plot. And I would walk out there, and this is why I totally stopped talking completely to all the fake news freaks that are out there. I mean, they're still walking around the halls of the Capitol. They should be embarrassed. They should be ashamed. It's the same people that were there in 2017 and 2018. They're still there today.
Do you really think I'm going to talk to the leading Democratic Party propaganda?
That was it? That's all I got?
That's pretty much it. I mean,
they don't apologize. I mean, they look like fools. They are fools. And, hopefully, maybe someday they'll just wake up and be ashamed of themselves and, I don't know, just get a new job or something.
I am your voice.
They still haven't admitted that all of that reporting was false.